The clatter of the heavy ceramic crock hitting the bottom of the industrial trash bin was deafening in the quiet bakery. It was a sound of finality, of 100 years of history being raced in a single brutal second. "It's unhygienic, inefficient, and obsolete, Arthur," Kevin said, his voice cold and clipped, wiping his clean hands on a towel. "We're a business, not a museum." Arthur Schmidt, his 72-year-old hands dusted with a phantom layer of flour, could only stare at the bin. His son-in-law had just thrown away Eric, the sourdough starter his grandfather had carried from Germany, a living, breathing piece of their family, the very soul of Hearthstone Bakery. For 50 years, Arthur's world had been defined by the warm, sweet and sour aroma that greeted him at 4 a.m. It was the scent of life, of heritage. Hearthstone Bakery, nestled in a working-class neighborhood of Cleveland, Ohio, was more than a shop. It was a sanctuary. The old brick oven, a behemoth that had baked bread through 2 world wars, radiated a gentle heat that warmed the soul. Arthur knew his customers not by their orders, but by their stories. Mrs. Gable, a widow who bought a rye loaf every Tuesday, saying its taste was the only thing that reminded her of her late husband. The Johnson family, who marked every birthday with one of Arthur's simple, perfect sheet cakes. His hands, though gnarled with age, moved with an artist's grace, understanding the dough not through measurements, but through feel. He knew by its resistance, its temperature, its smell, when it was ready. That intuition, that mastery, was a gift passed from his father and his father before him. Eric was the source of it all, the bubbling, tangy heart of every perfect loaf. Then his daughter Clara married Kevin, an MBA and a spreadsheet for a heart. After Arthur's wife passed, he'd handed the business operations to his son-in-law, hoping to keep the legacy in the family. It was a mistake. The day Eric was thrown out marked the end of an era. Hearthstone Bakery died, and in its place rose Rise Modern Baking Co. The warm wood was ripped out, replaced by sterile stainless steel and cold white tile. The air, once rich with the complex notes of slow fermentation, now smelled faintly of chemical cleaners and artificial vanilla from pre-made mixes. Kevin brought in high-speed mixers and digital proofing boxes. He fired the old staff and hired young baristas who knew how to make latte art but had never felt dough breathe. Arthur, once the maestro of his domain, was now an awkward ghost. Kevin, perhaps out of a sliver of pity, kept him on to sweep the floors and clean the trays. He watched as the new customers, drawn by slick Instagram ads, came for neon-colored cupcakes and cronuts, taking photos for their social media before tossing half-eaten pastries in the trash. The old regulars trickled away. "It's just not the same, Art," they'd whisper to him, their eyes full of sadness for a shared loss. Clara was trapped in the crossfire. She saw her father's quiet devastation, but wanted to support her husband's ambition. "Dad, profits are up 30%, she'd say gently. "We have to adapt to the times." But Arthur knew what was lost. He saw the bread that came out of the new ovens, perfectly uniform, perfectly symmetrical, and perfectly tasteless. It had no story, no soul. He felt his own life's work being rendered irrelevant, a footnote in a business plan that prioritized speed over substance. Each sweep of his broom felt like brushing away the last remnants of his own dignity. The turning point came unexpectedly. The city announced the inaugural Cuyahoga Bread Championship, a prestigious competition whose grand prize was a lucrative contract to be the exclusive artisan bread supplier for every high-end restaurant in Cleveland. For Kevin, this was the ultimate prize, the validation he craved to prove his modern methods were superior. He became obsessed, spending weeks testing formulas, adjusting hydration levels to the decimal point, and timing his bakes with a stopwatch. He created what he called a technically perfect loaf. But in the preliminary tasting, the judges were unmoved. "It's bread," one of them said with a shrug. "It lacks character. It has no soul." The feedback was a slap in the face. Kevin, who'd never failed at anything he could quantify, was facing public humiliation and financial ruin. He had sunk a small fortune into preparing for the contest. That night, he broke down, his usual arrogance crumbling into raw desperation in front of Clara. "I don't understand," he wept. "I did everything right. The numbers were perfect." Clara knew there was only one person who could help. She found her father in his small apartment above the bakery, sitting in the dark. She explained the situation, her voice thick with shame. Arthur listened, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stood up, walked to his old dusty refrigerator, and pulled out a small, unassuming jam jar. Inside was a pale, bubbling substance. "A man never throws away his soul," he said softly. He had rescued a small dollop of Erich from the crock before Kevin had tossed it. The next morning, before the sun rose, Arthur entered the bakery. He didn't say a word of blame or lecture. He simply put on his old, flour-dusted apron. Kevin, red-eyed and humbled, watched from the corner. What followed was not work. It was a ritual. Arthur didn't use machines. He mixed by hand in a large wooden bowl, his movements fluid and certain. He fed the starter, whispering to it as if it were an old friend. He kneaded the dough not with force, but with a gentle persuasion, stretching and folding until it came alive under his touch. The air began to fill with that long-lost scent, tangy, yeasty, and deeply comforting. He didn't use a timer. He watched the dough, touched it, and even listened to it. As dawn broke, he slid one single magnificent boule into the old brick oven. When he pulled it out an hour later, it was perfect. The crust was a deep, crackled mahogany, and the smell was a symphony of history and flavor that brought tears to Clara's eyes. They submitted that single loaf to the competition. When the judges sliced it open, a collective gasp went through the room. The crumb was a lacy network of irregular holes. The texture was chewy yet light, and the flavor was a revelation, a complex, tangy masterpiece that spoke of time, patience, and love. They won. There was no question. The victory was absolute. Driving home, the large silver trophy sitting awkwardly between them on the front seat, Kevin was silent. He pulled the van over to the side of the road, the engine idling. He turned to his father-in-law, his face streaked with tears that were no longer of frustration, but of profound shame and gratitude. "Arthur, I'm sorry," he choked out. "I was an arrogant fool. I thought I knew everything." He took a shuddering breath. "Please, will you teach me?" Arthur looked at the young man, not with triumph, but with compassion. He simply placed his calloused, flour-dusted hand on Kevin's shoulder and squeezed. In that silence, a legacy was not just saved, but reborn. The world rushes forward, always seeking the next new thing, the faster way. But some things, the things of true and lasting value, wisdom, mastery, a family's love, cannot be optimized or automated. They are cultivated slowly, over time, with patience and respect. The bakery on the corner of that quiet Cleveland street soon had a new sign, one that read, "Hearthstone and Son," a quiet testament to the enduring power of tradition and the grace of a second chance. If this story of patience and legacy touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales that remind us of what truly matters in this life. Take care of each other.